Good morning. ANNOTATED, the Committee on General Government Operation and Appropriation is now called to order. Today is Wednesday, September 27th. The time now is 9:15. I'd like to express my apologies that we weren't on time at 9 o'clock, but due to technical difficulties, and we had to ensure we had closed caption. Now we should be live and broadcasting. In compliance with the open government law, the notice for this public hearing were posted on GovGuam Public Notice Portal KGTF PBS Channel 12 and disseminated via email to all senators and all main media broadcasting outlets on Tuesday, September 20th, and on Monday, September 25th. There are 3 bills we'll be hearing this morning. The first one would be Bill number 90-37, sponsored by, authored by Senator Roy A.B. Kanata, an act to add a new Article 3, Chapter 18, Title 1, Guam Code Annotated, relative to mandating electronic reporting. Physical note for Bill 90-37 was requested on April 4th, and it was received and disseminated to all senators via email by the Committee on Rules. Those participating on behalf of Bill 90-37 CR are invited to the panel, and there is no one that is here to testify for that bill. But the general rules for this public hearing and throughout the morning shall be, please provide my legislative staff with any document for photocopying and distribution. Panel members are asked to remain in the room for questions or additional testimonies may be desired by members of the committee. Questions and testimonies shall be confined to the substance or nature of the agenda. Personal inference as to the character or motive of any senator or any individual testifying is not permitted. Any violation of this general rule of conduct will result in removal from the public hearing. Proper form requirements shall be practiced by all present in the public hearing room. For these proceedings, individuals who fail to maintain proper form and decorum will be restricted from participating and will be escorted from the room. When you speak, please make sure the microphone is on and that you speak into the microphone. Please state your name and your title for the record. I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues that have joined me this morning. I have the author of the bill, Senator Roy Kanata, Madam Speaker Therese Terline, my Vice Speaker, Senator Tello Taidewi, Senator Dwayne St. Nicholas, Senator Joanne Brown, and Senator Tom Fisher. I would ask Senator Kanata to go ahead and read his opening on his bill, 90-37. Sir.
Mr. Chair, good morning to my colleagues and good morning to those attending with us live. I am honored to be here today to present on 90-37, which would mandate electronic reporting. Bill 90-37 was introduced following the recommendations made by the Office of Public Accountability in their OPA Report 22-07. In the report, they state, with many reporting requirements, we suggest the elimination of written report submissions by GovGuam agencies and limiting reporting requirements to website posting at the agency level and email notification to be required to parties. An example, Governor's Office, speakers, this public auditor with attachments. Providing financial information on websites is more efficient and effective in enhancing accountability and promoting transparency in the government. The OPA report highlighted the need for more efficient and accurate method of reporting, and electronic reporting provides just that. By mandating all government agencies to transition to electronic reporting, we can ensure timely and accurate information is easily accessible to the public. In addition, this bill aims to reduce the bureaucratic burden on our agencies and save taxpayers' money by eliminating the need for manual reporting processes. Electronic reporting not only promotes transparency, but also streamlines government operations. I look forward to hearing the testimony we may possibly receive for Bill 90-37. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Kanata. If anyone would like to speak on that, I'll begin with Madam Speaker. Did you want to speak on this bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, and I'd like to thank the author for the bill and for trying to address the OPA's audit on this. So they gave a report, and so I had a couple questions, and one is pretty much just to follow up with OTEC perhaps as to whether this is possible for all agencies at this time, and if not, if there's anything to impede them from doing it. I don't want the reports to be late because an agency cannot afford to procure its website or did not do that, that's all. And I wanted to make sure that switching it, if they can't do it, that they can still give us whatever fashion and we will put it up. So we currently receive messages and, every report that is submitted to the Speaker's Office of the Legislature is put up on our website, and it's under a tab called Messages and Communications so that the public can access that. And that's all the reports that are mandated to be submitted to the speaker. So I've found that over the years to be a very good source of information when we're looking for anything on these agencies, at least to go follow up on their reports. But there are agencies, as the public auditor reported, that have failed to submit the reports. And they were kind of astonishing because some of these are 100% non-compliant with the submission documents according to the OPA. He cited Parks and Rec, non-compliant 7 instances out of 16. The Guam Board of Accountancy, 7 instances of non-compliance out of 7 total instances. The Office of the Governor, 6 non-compliance out of 6 total. Chamorro Land Trust Commission, 6 non-compliance out of 6 total. So of course, this information is very helpful to me, the report that the auditor does, so that I can follow up with Chamorro Land Trust, for example, to what in the world is going on there. I have found myself, for example, that's an agency over the years that has some issues getting their stuff up on the website as it's mandated to do. So I support the bill. I'd like, the electronic is very convenient for us, for everyone receiving them, and I think for the public too. And I just want to make sure that on the agency level, they're able to comply with this mandate. So thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the sponsor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Senator Tello?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning to my colleagues, and good morning to those who are listening today. I have no problem with this legislation. However, it's very similar to legislation that I introduced. It's Public Law 30-22. And the information that's required and provided to the public on their website with audits, contracts, awards, awardees, general descriptions of things like that information, even down to the operating hours, are required. I just think that if we're going to start, issuing these types of legislation that provides transparency, I think the best thing to do is to also have some kind of enforcement so that the bills that we have can earn the trust of the people and promote the accountability throughout our island, or our people. So I'm hoping that maybe some kind of amendment will be made to provide some kind of teeth to this measure to ensure they get done. Because if we don't, everyone's gonna, oh, well, I forgot. What are you gonna do? Slap my hand? That's not conducive. And if we really want to stand behind what we're talking about in measures like this, then we need to add teeth to it. So I thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tello. I'm going to ask you a simple question. What would you recommend would be the penalty? Because some of them will take it, like you said, very lightly. It's a slap in the hand, and just so the committee can make the appropriate amendments and recommendations to the author on how we can amend it.
Well, at this time, Mr. Chair, I think fees have always been a way of doing that type of enforcement. For an example, BBMR, if they don't provide us the CRER report, there is repercussions. I think it's $100. The Office of Attorney General, they're required to provide an opinion to us. That also, to them, would be about $100 a day without them providing that information to the legislature when requested, given a timeline. So things like that could also, well, I look to my colleagues too. Other than fines, maybe we can find another option. And who would be responsible? Would it be the director? Would it be the one who oversees the website in that agency? But ultimately, of course, the responsibility is at who's running the facility. So yeah, fees, fines, like that.
All right, thank you. Senator Dwayne Sinecris, do you have any questions on the bill or comments for the bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Absolutely none. I agree with the measure, and I think we should add some teeth, just like the same as the previous speaker. Maybe a $100 fine for, or like something like a traffic ticket, maybe. But that's it. But I support this this legislation as it aims to be more transparent and build trust amongst our officials and the people. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Senator Brown, do you have any comments on this bill?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I certainly support the effort to ensure greater accountability and transparency in government that this bill will add on to. But I agree certainly with the comments that have been echoed by Senator Tello and Senator San Nicolas. I think probably one of the things we need to do, because we pass laws, but we have agents of the government that don't address implementing this legislation. And unless there's some consequence, they simply don't do it. And the public is left in the dark with regards to these official documents and what actions or decisions are being made on their behalf, and not having access to this information. Certainly should the public choose to want to see it, they have the right to do that. They don't want to, nevertheless, the information should be there. So I think we need to actually start looking, and I know Senator Tello has been very active in the past in looking at how can we put mechanisms in legislation so that there is consequences, particularly to the head of department and agencies that don't fulfill their mandate with regards to what is being required under law. I don't know if we should actually look at taking down a certain percentage of their budget and reducing it until these issues are addressed. I think those issues are as critical. When you're spending public money, you need to be accountable for how you spend it. And for those that are entrusted for that time, and some of us have sat in those chairs, so I don't think I'm speaking out of turn, there's an expectation for performance. And if they're not performing, then by all means, I don't think we can rely on the governor to make sure that her or his, you know, it goes back to a male governor, are ensuring that their people are performing. I mean, a lot of things seem to slip and slide away. So I think it's important. We should put mechanisms in place that automatically maybe, I don't know if it's a direct fine to the director or simply start reducing by percentage their budget until the issue gets addressed. Until you put some mechanism in there to require it, you're going to have directors that are not going to see this as a priority. Probably some don't even know it's required to begin with. So while we can put a lot of time and effort into passing laws, I mean, there's many laws in the books that are collecting dust and are not being enforced. And the government has yet to get to a level of where these things are automatically put in place, and you don't always have the most proficient people running departments. That's a sad reality. So I certainly support it, but I would also hope that the author can maybe look at some mechanism to actually ensure that if action's not taken, there's some consequence to the department and to its leadership for not putting these requirements in place. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to comment on this bill.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Senator Fisher? No comment. At this point, I'll ask Senator Cananta to speak and make a closing, but I'd like to only make one comment. I'm just surprised that OTEC's not here. OTEC should have been here. And I think that when we do put a mechanism in there, the responsible agency to assist them be also included in the fine, if there's going to be a fine imposed. Because you can't expect an agency to do something that deals with IT expertise, that the Office of Technical OTEC should be guiding them and making sure they're doing it right. Senator Cananta?
Mr. Chair, I thank those who can't, unfortunately we didn't have anyone that were able to attend today for whatever reason, but I want to thank those who have attended with us live, and I want to thank my colleagues for coming out this morning. I really appreciate your presence today. So I certainly, I'm amendable to having some kind of teeth put into this legislation. We certainly want to make sure accountability holds its feet, and we put our best foot forward. So thank you again, Mr. Chair, and we'll look towards amending the bill to have some teeth. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cananta. There being no one present to provide any testimony, this hearing is now concluded. I want to thank everyone, my colleagues that are here this morning and participating. And Bill number 90-37 CR public hearing is now adjourned. The time now is 9:30. We will now proceed on to the next following bill, which is Bill 95-37, sponsored by authored also by Senator Cananta, an act to repeal Section 1107 of Chapter 1, Title 3, Guam Code Annotated, and repeal all of Chapter 15, Title 3, Guam Code Annotated, relative to removing the primary election of its entirety. And I'd like to call to the panel, we have present, we have Ms. Panglinan, the Director of Guam Election Commission. She also has some of her staff, and if they're going to join, please come forward. If not, we also have Mr. Sidfree Ninsangan. Please join us on the panel. And again, I'd like to remind everyone of the general rules of this public hearing. But I'd also like to also mention that the public notice was also provided to the, in compliance with the open government law. The notice for this public hearing were posted on GovGuam Public Notice Portal, KGTF, PBS Channel 12, and disseminated via email to all senators and all main media broadcasting outlets on, again, Tuesday, September 20th, and on Monday, September 25th. A reminder that we are now going to be discussing Bill 95-37 COR, authored by Senator Roy B. Canata, an act to repeal Section 1107 of Chapter 1, Title 3, Guam Code Annotated, and to repeal all of Chapter 15, Title 3, Guam Code Annotated, relative to removing the primary election of its entirety. There was a physical note that was requested, and it was received and disseminated to all senators via email by the Committee on Rules. Reminder of the general rules of this public hearing. If you have any documents that needs to be photocopied and distributed, please provide that to my legislative staff. Panel members are asked to remain in the room for question or additional testimony as may be desired by members of the committee. Question and testimony shall be confined to the substance or nature of the agenda. Personal inference as to the character or motive of any senator or any individual testifying is not permitted. Any violation of the general rule of conduct will result in removal from the public hearing. Proper form and quorum shall be practiced by all present in the public hearing room for these proceedings. Any individual who fails to maintain proper form and quorum shall be restricted from participating and will be escorted from the room. When you speak, please make sure that the microphone is on and that you speak into the microphone. Please state your name and your title for the record. Again, I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues that have joined me this morning. We have the author of the bill, Senator Canata, Madam Speaker Therese Terlai, Senator Tello Taitagui, Senator Joanne Brown, Senator Dwayne Snickers, and Senator Tom Fisher. I'd ask the author of the bill to give his opening statement.
Sujos Masi, Mr. Chair. Bill 95-37 is a measure to remove the primary elections in its entirety. As a senator, I believe it's my duty to address issues that are important to our community and find ways to improve our government processes. First, I want to emphasize that this bill was introduced as a cost-saving measure. It is no secret that Guam primary elections are costly and oftentimes proceed, despite seeing that all candidates are qualified for placement on the ballot, would proceed to a general election automatically. Such is often the case with several races. This not only leads to unnecessary expenses, but also wastes valuable resources for Guam Election Commission and our political parties. I believe that by moving the primary election, we can streamline the election process and allocate funds towards the pressing issues in our community. This bill will also encourage more participation from voters, as they will only need to vote once during the general election. I'm also looking forward to hearing testimony from the Guam Election Commission and Mr. Siegfried, and each political party. I'm hopeful in the coming days, because it is important for us to be thorough in understanding all perspectives, but before making any of these decisions moving forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Canata. And we have Ms. Pangilinan and Mr. Lansangan. I'd ask Ms. Pangilinan to go ahead and begin her testimony.
Hafide, Mr. Chairman and Senators of the Minat Chantay Sheti, Legislatura in Guam. Sidus Maasi for the opportunity to provide testimony here today. Bill number 95-37 that seeks to eliminate the primary election entirely. The Guam Election Commission, I must stress, is ministerial in nature and presents today the sections of the chapter that will affect other sections of the Guam Election Code annotated, the Guam Code annotated, that affects the conduct of special and general elections. The list is attached and enclosed. I believe, did you want me to go through with it, Senator? Yes?
Just go ahead and give you a full presentation so everybody can, and everybody
Okay.
watching and listening can.
Okay.
Actually,
So there are about, there are 2 pages, about 3 pages of the different sections of Chapter 15, which is the conduct of primary elections in Title 3, that will affect the conduct of the general and special elections. With regard to the cancellation, one of the major major repercussions would be the very probability of a runoff election if the primary election is canceled. Should there be at least 3 teams, gubernatorial teams, or 3 congressional delegate candidates, it would be difficult at the general election for these teams and candidates to receive the 50% plus 1 majority to be certified as the winner of the elections. Just to summarize the sections in the code that will be affected as well, is one of the major issues is how will the Guam Election Commission place the candidates on the general election ballot when all of Chapter 15 is eliminated or is repealed. Again, with regard to the cost, Senator Roy, it may be wiped off the table if we have to conduct a runoff election. This will be on the committee report, the specific sections of Chapter 15 that will affect the rest of the code and the general and special elections. So I will just conclude with that, and I will be here I will be available to address any questions the senators have.
Okay, Mr. Siegfried?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, and to all the senators, Speaker Terlai. First of all, I regret not supporting your first bill, the electronic voting. I think that was a very good bill to provide check and balance, especially most of the agencies are making policy that is not consistent with the laws that were passed by the legislature, especially the procurement people. Now, in this regard, in your bill, I have admired you for reintroducing this bill so that I hope there would be a final or the last piece or last introduction for this bill. However, I did not support this bill. First of all, because of our constitutional right that is secured, our right that is secured and guaranteed by the Constitution and federal laws. I'm referring to Amendment 24, Section 1, the right of the citizen of the United States to vote in any primary or other election for president or vice president, for election or any other offices. Well, we are the legislature. We should interpret the law based on the way it's written. We are not a court that can reverse the law or make the law, make the color red and turn it to blue. We should stick to the language of the law. Just like the bill of Senator Dwayne Sadiculas, making the senator up to 21, because the language said so. It said that it should up to 21 members. It does not say that we can reduce it or we can make it 15. And this constitution is extended to the U.S. citizen. It doesn't say we are not extended, even though we are territory. It's a matter of interpretation of the court. And the court is always favoring the federal government and disregarding the rights of the U.S. citizen in the territory, because their loyalty is to the federal law. They're being paid by the federal government. So they're not fighting for us. That's why I do not support this law. That's my primary reason. And second, we will not be saving money because there would always be a runoff election. And if you remember the last runoff election, only 30% voted. 30% because there's only 2 candidates for Congress. You see, we will be in the same situation. We're spending money for only few participants, few electors going to the voting booth. Third, if you notice, I would attribute your election, being elected as a senator, because of the primary election. You were the first one that put your sign in the road. So you were appreciated by the people. You know, and that's because of the primary election. In June, you already have your sign, or I think May. See, that you should take a close look at that because it's not really saving us money at all. And at the same time, it would be just expensive for the other candidates to pursue the general election, even they are on the number 10 to 15 in the primary election. Because once you are in that bracket, it's very hard already to win in the general election. It's just saving, you know, no matter what you do, you should be at least on the top 7, you know, top 8 to have a chance. And then if you want to work hard, you can check the record of where you did not do good. Just like, for example, in the South or the North, then you have to campaign hard in that area in order to have a chance. That's why I hope you will not proceed with this bill, because it's a violation of our right. The more we are condoning the atrocity from the federal government for not honoring and recognizing the rights of the United U.S. citizen in the territory. That's my main concern. We need to fight for our right. You know, like for example, it's specified there for president, but we cannot vote for president. You know, we have the right to vote for primary, but we can. Now you're trying to take it out. There's other bill that you can help the people, like, for example, just like the GPA, we cannot use the credit from other account to transfer to other credit. Other people got 3,000 credit from other account, but the GPA would not allow us to use it on other account. And they said it would just go back to the government. You know, it would not benefit some people or most of the people, because sometimes they have credit. You know, just like the trust bin, only a small portion we use if you're a husband and wife. You know, only 1/8. If you're single, you don't even need a trust bin. And then there's a bill that is mandating that. You know, anyway, yeah, that's already beside the issue. But that's my main position, Mr. Chairman, Senator Roy Kinata. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, sir. I have maybe several questions. I'm looking at your input, Ms. Panglin. So basically, you're saying, not really saying it, but we need a primary for the governor and the delegate because there's going to end up being a runoff, more likely. Am I correct? I mean, is that generally what you're saying?
That's, again, Senator, I have to address that we're ministerial in nature. Yes.
But
so,
the end result
yes,
will end up with a runoff.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, moving down the line, I'm looking at everything that you keep referencing the primary election as a reference in sections. You've identified several of them, person eligible for one office. Just moving down the line on your testimony that you submitted. I'm just trying to see what would be one of the basics, because you know we can amend the law to say that the governor and the delegates will have a primary because we're trying to save money, but at the end of the day, then it doesn't matter. We end up with a primary. So the issue of saving funds wouldn't matter because you still have to spend for that part. So it's either you get rid of the primary and you worry about the runoff, or you leave it alone. Because at the end of the day, in the general election, the most votes will be the key unless you're that close, unless the percentage is there.
That's correct.
correct?
Correct, sir.
Okay. I move that. Senator Grante, you want to wait to be the closing? And okay, Madam Speaker, do you have any questions for the
Yes,
panel?
thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for your testimony, Mr. Lasangan and Director Pangilinan. All right, so I understand your concern that also with the attachments that you submitted, that a repeal of the entire chapter might go further than we intend, and that we need to be a little bit more surgical about that and leave because some of those provisions affect your whole general election mandates. And so, all right, so that's one. Number two, this discussion about we're not going to save money because runoffs would be required, especially for elections where there might be just three teams or three individuals running, such as the gubernatorial or the congressional election. How would you suggest this applies for senatorial elections? What if we repealed the primary for senatorial elections only?
You're elected with plurality only, so with regard to the conduct of elections, it would be, I have to tell you that inside the operation of the elections, the mayoral race is, requires a lot more effort than a gubernatorial election inside the conduct of elections. That's because we have to deal with at least 19 mayoral candidates and the like. Speaker, with regard to your question, is it
It require runoffs for senatorial elections? Would it
No.
likely require runoffs?
No.
No, that's not going to have that same implication for
No.
a senatorial election. So you're saying it would be more similar to the mayor elections where we have a number of candidates and they run just once in a general election? Is that why? Mayoral?
They're also elected by plurality, so we don't need a runoff.
Is there a
for them.
primary right now for mayors?
Yes.
Okay.
So in the past, the legislature has eliminated primaries for those without contest. For both, I think only for the mayors, where Senator, if we remember in our discussions, was taken off, put back on, and taken off again. Okay. So that actually operationally, when we take a look at it at the Guam Election Commission, and if we're looking at the cost, and just strictly I'm addressing operations, the Office of the Attorney General and the Office of the Public Accountability in the primary election doubles the cost of ballots because they have to appear on a separate ballot, if you remember. So with regard to primaries and the different seats up for election, those, as far as the Guam Election Commission, operationally, that's where costs, that's where there are substantial costs that could be saved.
Okay, thank you. And so, Mr. Chair, I was hoping the political parties would be present. This is really in their interests or disinterest, right? Because this is the primaries select for the parties. And so we have, as a government, put in by statute how we are going to conduct these primaries. But I wanted to know, if we repealed that, would it still allow the parties themselves to come up with their own rules as to how they're going to select their candidates and tell you, the Guam Election Commission, these are our candidates? I'm curious about that.
As far as our scans of Guam Code Annotated, Taza, there's none. It would be just with the reference to the political parties is that they just submit a current list of their officers for every election season.
Okay, so that's my concern, I guess, right? I want to know for sure. If the government repeals its version of a primary election, how will the political parties determine their candidates, or do they have that opportunity or not? Or are we going to, is it going to result in what I think we intend, in an overall free-for-all, you know, senatorial election, for example? Eliminate the primary, then you go straight to a general, you have one election for senators and the top 15 win. Something like that is what I think is intended, but yeah, I just want to make sure that that's what the result is, as opposed to, well, it just depends, right? If what the political parties say, or are they going to pursue their right to determine who represents Democrats versus Republicans? That, I'm curious about that. Thank you for going through the code and very particularly citing which other instances we need to be concerned about if we do an overall repeal, and so we can be more specific. And I know, Mr. Chair, we had this bill on the 34th. That was my first term as senator, and much debate. So I'm trying to go back and look at those files or our journal and see what the debate was. I thought we had a really excellent debate. I want to appreciate the sponsor for putting this bill now and not closer to the election, like some of the bills, you know, on regarding elections have been. That's really been my biggest concern, is I don't want to change the rules while people have already geared up to run and made their determinations. I like it because, well, the intent is that more people will run. I'm not sure exactly how that encourages more people to run. They still would have to declare a party. Is that correct?
Speaker, how to put the candidates on the ballot, there's no mandate if this chapter is repealed. So I don't know if I don't know what the pleasure of the legislature is with regard to parties, because it will be absent. It will be totally absent.
All right. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you again, Mr. Lasong. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Panglin, I think one of the questions you didn't answer, but it didn't lead you to answer, was, you remember that the Democrat Party was using the court order? Maybe you can answer that in reference to the primary. I think that is where we wanted to get your opinion on that one, because as much as you may say they really don't have, they do have a say because it was court ordered, and you guys are supposed to write against the rules and whatever. But if this bill goes through, it wouldn't matter. It's gone. But if there is a court order, will there be a contest in the court to determine that why did we pass something that the court had directed? And maybe you can give your opinion of where the election commission stand on that one.
Judge Lamorena's court order simply tells the Guam Election Commission to write to both parties so that they can decide if the party wants an open or closed primary. It does not mention about the conduct of the primary. It simply states, make sure you hear from the parties what kind of primary election they want, whether it be open or closed. Thank you.
Okay, so this bill will just eliminate that question.
Yeah. Thank
Madam
you,
Speaker.
Mr. Chair. Thank you for that. And so I guess my question then would be, is there anything that authorizes a party to conduct a closed general election?
No, only the primary.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Senator Tello, you have any question for the panel?
Well, so I'm going to be reading what you brought, in front of us, and to look into this thoroughly. Of course, review what happened in the 34th that the speaker brought up. I wasn't aware of that. However, the strengths on this bill is very minimal compared to the weaknesses of it. For instance, of course, we look at cost savings, but then again, that eliminates that, because what happens if we have to have a runoff? It's the same cost as having a primary. So are we really going to save any money on that? The focus on just, having a primary and, a general, could be just focused on that, I'm trying to pull strengths here and weaknesses, the pros and cons of it, but the weakness is definitely, party politics. You come into that, you come in vetting the process, you come into concentration of power, you come into exposure of new candidates, the lack of not being able to have new candidates exposed as much as those who are sitting in office currently right now. Reduced scrutiny, for instance, you're taking out that possibility. And most importantly, are we really going to get a better voting turnout? That's where it boils down to. Maria, you've been sitting here trying to advocate for that. What can we do to make it easier for people to come out to vote? Educate them on who's running and how you can find out about a candidate, and not just, making a phone call, hey, are you voting for this guy? Yeah, I'm going to vote for him. Okay, I'll do it. Without even knowing who you're voting for. Primaries provide that scrutiny. It does. It gives a little more time for it. Is it worth the money? Absolutely. I'm just so sick and tired of hearing people, just voting based because my pari or my parents told me to, rather than finding that mechanism of scrutinizing and knowing your candidate before voting for them. Why are we here today on this bill? I don't see any political party here asking for this legislation at all. None. If this is important and the author is sincere about this, then let's have a round table. Let's invite the political parties. Let's invite, Joe Public out there to come and sit at the table and discuss with us. Not just put out a bill because it sounds good or someone told you to do it. No, we need to go further. This is huge for this body to decide on. Because we're putting ourselves in a situation here that kind of makes us look like we're actually going to do something that's going to benefit us. And technically, this is what this bill does. If the senators don't have a primary, you know what's going to happen. The majority of sitting incumbents are going to stay sitting incumbents. So this really needs to be scrutinized. Again, is this going to bring out a better voting turnout? Is it? Maria, what do you think?
Madam Senator, I know how to run an election. I don't know how to run a campaign. So I wouldn't know what it would, I don't know how to bring, we're going to try. We try as much as possible to increase the voter participation. But honest to goodness, I don't know how to campaign.
Well, I tell you, Maria, your job in your position is to ensure a larger voter turnout. That's your job. Your job to find out better ways to bring people to those polling sites, the majority of this island. So I hope you do look into ways of bringing more people out to vote and what can we do to make that happen, and most especially to educate our voters on this island on who they're voting for. So I thank you for being here. Thank you for your testimonies. Thank you. Mr. Siegfried, did you have anything to say?
Yes, Senator.
Anything different from what you said earlier?
Yeah, different.
Okay, let's do it.
I just want to add that our electors' percentage is stable, almost 50% or 55% every election in the general election. And now, the one that would be affected with the elimination of the primaries, we would have a weak voters' participation in the runoff election. Because the runoff election would be a standard. Every election, we would have a runoff. Because we cannot, it's hard to get 50 plus 1%. So, and then people with two candidates only on the runoff election, then people are not voting. Just like what I said, only 30% voted in the last runoff elections. So you have candidates that won the Congress and governor that is only elected by almost 30% of the people, and that's not good. That's the adverse effect of eliminating the primary election.
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator San Nicolas?
Morning, everybody. Morning, ma'am. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think eliminating the primary altogether would make the election process not fun. One of the best parts about our election is that, you know, they're fun. They're fun. And last primary, and we had like how many elections throughout the villages, north, central, and south. I particularly like voting at the West End, and I've got a lot of feedback from everybody saying that they really enjoyed that part of the process. So I want to thank you, ma'am, Ms. Pangilinan, for, you know, conducting the wonderful elections throughout the years and being a calm voice during those very fun times and reassuring. I think eliminating the primary altogether kind of pushes us back, and I don't think it might be beneficial for our government and for our people. I think this also helps bring them out. We just need to have more participation from the public. Mr. Lansangan, I've watched you through the years. Never really quite heard your message before, but I see that you're quite versed, and I like that you quote from the Constitution, and you seem like a very well-intentioned individual, and I like to thank you for coming out and expressing your concern. I look forward to seeing you in the next primary. And I would like to thank everybody for coming out, and I don't have anything further, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Tello, do you have anything for the panel? Correction, Senator Brown. Same family, same side.
Now we're twins. Tie degree, brown, brown, tie degree. There's a team. There's a team. Thank you very much, Mrs. Pangilinan, for being here, Mr. Lansangan. I mean, it's appearing that this issue is not as clear-cut as one would like to think, and this issue came up years ago about the idea of reducing the cost of the election by simply eliminating the primary election. But we're also seeing, and I appreciate the time and effort, certainly, Ms. Pangilinan, you put through to provide a breakdown here of all the other legislation that's in place, the laws that are in place that would be impacted by removing the primary election. Gubernatorial, I think that's probably going to be the most interesting one. I mean, as you mentioned, the senatorial top 15, whoever they are, you know, that's what the numbers are going to be. Of course, the little more work and effort that's put in, of course, for each of the 19 villages, and we have that election coming up next year. So even myself, I understand the desire to simply, well, let's remove it, and whoever shows up at the general and survives it, you know, more power to them. But you're also right, in contested elections, especially at the gubernatorial level, if you have all these teams converging at once, and if they don't have the percentage of votes they need, more than likely we're going to end up having a re-election or runoff again. And that, to me, just extends the election process. And the one thing I like about elections is when they're over. Regardless of who wins or loses, everybody kind of, you know, raises a sigh of relief and recoups, cries, whatever. And then we move on and we get into the holiday season and it's a new year. Extending this in the times when we've had to, it's kind of, I'm sure for you and your staff, even extra work because you've already put all this effort in and then you have to go and do it again. But that would concern me, is having to extend this whole election process into the new year. Even now, of course, and I wanted to ask you because, we're seeing over the years, we used to be able to brag how, 80+% of our voters used to come to the polls and vote. And there may be a whole lot of reasons, including I think a lot of people are just, they're almost of the feeling sometimes it doesn't matter who they put in, it's the same old story. So I kind of feel that maybe some of our people are just saying it doesn't matter what I think anymore. Is the government going to run any effectively with or with my vote? But I wanted to ask you, because I think there's also a certain degree, and I appreciate all the efforts that your staff put in place during these past elections during the pandemic to provide all the voting sites in the different villages for northern, central, south, and even at your office to accommodate our residents that wanted to be able to vote early or because of the pandemic didn't want to show up on the day of the election. But at the same time, I know that put a lot of resources and cost. And so while we're even looking at this issue in terms of primary, if we simply went back to a primary election and a general election without all these other, 30 days, 40 days, whatever, before the election voting, would that be something that's more workable for your staff instead of having all these extended elections and voting locations going on? Because I think that, I can understand it for the pandemic, but I would like to get back to a normal election and you show up on that day and vote, or unless you, maybe a week or two, if there's some reason you're traveling or whatever, to show up to vote. Would that make it easier to go back to that versus the extended election process we have and just simply have a primary and simply have a general, as we've always had for many years?
So 2020 is not a good benchmark for early voting. Maybe 2022. But it seemed like our voters like early voting. Senator Brown, I want to know if you're alluding to lowering the number of polling sites?
No, not polling sites, but
Okay.
the time frame.
Okay.
Because
yes.
I don't like forever elections either, because that to me is
Yeah.
also an opportunity to manipulate election as well.
Okay.
If it extends too long and, I can track and get a gauge
Yes.
of where maybe what I can work on to get my additional votes, that
So,
might be good for you as
yeah.
a candidate. But I also fear the ability to manipulate the process.
Okay, so
if you extend elections too long.
So early voting right now can do up to 30 days. Yes, across the nation, I think even CNMI only has it for 2 weeks. And so our experience with early voting in 20 and 22 says that at the beginning of early voting in 20 and 22, it was pretty slow. So the trend is our voters are going to wait to the last minute. So whether it be 30 days or 2 weeks, that could be a cost savings if we lower the number of days for early voting. And then the other thing, major cost, right, is in getting the 22 polling sites up and ready. That's a major cost. We do hear, and we don't have any official survey or anything about who wants to show up on election day versus who wants to early vote. What we do is keep track of how many come to early voting versus how many show up on election day. One fact that we need to note, the Guam Election Commission needs to let you all know that with the enactment of motor voter registration, it's so easy to register, and so our numbers of voter registration balloons because of motor voter registration. If you look at the election comparative analysis report, please pay attention to how many of the motor voters actually come out to participate. So our number of registered voters balloons. So maybe what we should start looking at maybe are just the real numbers of voters, real numbers of those that are participating. At one time, I believe it was a gubernatorial, there was 40,000. So we're like 37,000. So it's really, as far as the real numbers go, it's not so bad. But what inflates it all is motor voter registration, where we go up as high as 61 to 63,000 registered voters, and then 37,000 show up. So that's something else to look at. Are we doing okay with with voter participation? Maybe, but because of that one assumption, one fact of the matter that affects the percentage of voter participation is the enactment of motor voter. So people register to vote up at DMV, and they realize that they do, because we send them letters when we send them a letter of confirmation saying that they're now registered to vote. Please show up at the primary election first Saturday of August. But they don't show up. Take a look at that and see how the senators want to do, how the legislature wants to deal with that.
So you're thinking probably those that go up for registration are really just there to get their license and get their registration and really not intending to vote or have an interest of voting?
Senator, yes. Motor voter is helpful for us in the sense that we probably get updated addresses. Okay, so if you registered at 18 and you kept voting, I would probably have your signature as an 18-year-old
Right.
and your address at home with parents, when in fact now your signature changed and your address has changed. We don't have any way to update it. Motor voter is good in that sense. But we also have online registration, and that helps with us getting updates on addresses and with addresses. With regard to how much work it has created for the Guam Election Commission, when we tell you, when people come up to tell us that it's an off year, what are we doing? In that case, every odd year, our focus is on cleaning up the registry. We process, I think, 3,000 motor voter registrants a month. Not all of them. Some of them don't want to register. Some of them are non-U.S. citizens, but we still have to go through every single application so we don't miss anybody out and we don't disenfranchise anyone.
Well, I think it sounds like a very simple process, but I think in particular the votes that are going to be contested or the challenge and focus is going to be the gubernatorial race. Let's not kid ourselves. And we got a gubernatorial election coming up in about 3 years. And, and I appreciate certainly the point Senator Tello brought up about the fact that the parties are not here, because, I mean, some might really hold their breath if they really, really wanted their political party to decide who's going to be the candidate. I don't think it's so much an issue on our side of the aisle. I think it's going to be an issue more on the other side of the aisle if there's more than one candidate that, you're going to wonder, because we've seen how some candidates are embraced because we know who sits in the committee. Who are they supporting? Who's their godzu that they're supporting and who they're not? And you may have legitimate candidates running that may not be embraced by their party, that may never get a chance of day to get out the door, to even be put on the ballot. So I think we have to weigh the internal politics of the parties as well, and their input, because they're not here to provide us any input of how perhaps would they actually conduct, if they were tasked to conduct their own primaries to determine who their candidate's going to be for the gubernatorial race. I mean, that's the politics, emanates all over the place, and it would be interesting to see how that would happen. But certainly as a result of the information you provided, and just, as mentioned earlier, this issue has been going back and forth for a long, back in my first round, we've discussed whether or not we should get rid of the primary. But there's a lot more factors we need to take into consideration as to whether or not this is ultimately going to address the concerns or create more problems. So appreciate your testimony and your input with regards to this bill. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Senator Fisher, do you have any questions or comments for the panel?
Ma'am, you were in speaking about this entire process. It seems to me that the entire goal of what we are doing is to increase the franchise. We want as many people to vote as possible. Would it be possible to have same-day registration, or in other words, you can register and then go vote?
Possible, yes. We've looked into that, and across the nation, the jurisdictions that have same-day registration requires a lot more than what you would do if you let's say pre-registered. In the other jurisdictions across the nation, they would require some sort of proof of residency, a paper that says that. Is it possible? We've looked into it. You know, the possibility, the other complication, Senator Fisher, would be the challenge process. So we would have to address the challenge process, challenge somebody. Now we have to address whether that person is qualified to register to vote. Is it possible? Yes. Do I recommend it? I'm not here to recommend it or not, but you know, is it possible to host same-day registration? Other election jurisdictions across the nation do it. And I don't know if jurisdictions that don't require IDs do same-day registrations. I know quite a few of them. I know the Colorado jurisdictions, they have software that would recognize professionally signatures. And that's something that we need to figure out if you want same-day registration. Is that person the person that's in front of us, even with an ID? Would we be capable by then to go into DMV files to validate that person's identity?
Okay. Other jurisdictions have faced the same or similar problems?
With regard to same-day?
Yes.
You know, I haven't really, when I go to the national meetings, I just learned, you know, I learn about what is required. It's more a complicated process for the voter because they have to provide that kind of proof with them. And it's different, you know. I don't know if it's regional, if it's different in the West, the East, or I don't know. I can look into that. One of our favorite sources of information is the National Conference of State Legislatures that you're available. So we can take a look at that and see how many have same-day registration and who has same-day registration and what is required of a voter.
Okay, because the goal is to get as many people as are eligible to vote. So the easier we make the process, the more people we can enfranchise, the better.
Senator Fisher, again, when I go to the national meetings, Guam probably has the easiest, not easiest, the most convenient way to register. We have the most convenient way to register. So with regard to registration, you know, you just have to register once. Yeah, so should we address that? How many of our residents here don't register to vote on time? Our experience is not many. Our media partners do an excellent job of telling everybody, hurry up and register to vote. Our media partners do an excellent job over social media to tell them, hurry up, you can register online, get with the program, and please register. Something that we've worked on in 2022, we were addressing precinct officials. And in doing that, we were hard up in 2020 during COVID. And then in 2022, we were still hard up for precinct officials that our parties normally help us with. I started teaching an academic credit bearing course. I piloted it for the 2022 election. Since then, the university has invited me to hurry up and start teaching it as a regular course. We're in the process of proposing that it be taught on even years only for the fall and the spring semester, so that not only are we going to address precinct official recruitment, that's where, you know, it's those guys, the 18 to 24 years, that are underrepresented in voter participation. So we hope to be able to increase that by that effort of making it inside the university.
Okay, all right, thank you very much for that. I'm glad that you brought up this idea of, demographics and who votes and who doesn't. Just as an aside, this is an extremely important issue. I'm very disappointed. I don't know where the Republican Party is. I don't know where the Democratic Party is. This is extremely important, and this is the only hearing on this bill, and they're nowhere to be seen, and this directly affects them, so I don't know. I don't know what the problem is. They certainly received adequate public notice. And then you did mention about, the 18 to 24-year-old demographic. They're the hardest ones to get to the polls for various reasons. And you also mentioned that we had early voting at the Westin and elsewhere, I believe. The Westin that went through great, so congratulations on that. Do you receive ballots by mail?
Yes. So those ballots by mail are only for those that are off-island.
Okay, like Uokava and...
Uokava and off-island students. Uokava includes people that are living in foreign countries, not necessarily military. Senator Fisher, that really helps for our medical referrals.
Sure.
We go out of our way to make sure our medical referral patients, we go to the hospital during early voting. If they're going to, we go out, we're allowed by law to go to the hospital and make them vote before they leave.
Okay, and then I won't stay on this because I know we're here about the primary issue, but I haven't heard, last election was sterling. I didn't hear of any problems. Have you encountered, there's been a lot of brouhaha on the mainland, false allegations of voter fraud and et cetera and so forth. I'm unaware of any fraudulent activities at all on Guam.
Senator Fisher, our information technology person, Jack Martinez, just came back from MS ISAC. It's multiple security, electronic, anti-cybersecurity stuff. Okay, and I get a little nervous because now the focus is on interference via China. So we're very close. When we go to when we go to those meetings, we make sure, yes, this is we're the closest point to China, and so we have good communication with National Homeland Security, excellent communication with local Homeland Security. Our infrastructure is monitored in terms of just what goes in and what goes out. When there's something that's not normal, we would be alerted to that.
Did you anything like that come up?
Taza, no.
Not at all. Okay, so we're good. Okay, here's a hypothetical. Suppose that I'm in my first term and there is another general election coming up here in about, 12, 18 months or something. And let's suppose that this bill passes. There are no more primaries. And I decide I would like to run for election to the Senate. How would I get on the ballot?
I don't know. If you repeal this whole chapter,
Yeah.
It doesn't, the law doesn't even, the current law, if this chapter is repealed, the current law does not even tell Guam Election Commission how to put Senator Fisher on the ballot.
So you just, the law is silent. If this thing passes, the law will be silent, and you won't know how to do it?
Correct.
Okay, well, this question's probably superfluous then. How could you prevent, if we don't have a primary and it's essentially a free-for-all, it's almost undemocratic, because you might have such ballot congestion. You might have 700, 800, 900 or more candidates on the ballot, which would make it an almost impossible choice for the voter. In that sense, it would be undemocratic. But I guess my larger question is, how could you prevent a very legitimate concern? Our Supreme Court says so. How can you prevent ballot congestion?
There's another chapter in the title that deals with candidates. That deals with candidates,
Okay.
right? There's another chapter to that. And most of the qualifications for candidates is just attestation.
Okay.
Yeah. So tightening the qualifications, but we cannot go against the Organic Act that simply says that you have to be 25 and a resident to run for senator, right?
So conceivably, the entire village of Dededo that is a citizen and over 25 could get on the ballot to run for Senate or PUC or anything, correct?
Yes, Senator, and through my experience there, that's 12 years of experience. I think we've only, people who have come up to say they're interested in running, I think we've only turned down less than 10. Not turned down, but we've let them know that, you know, you may not qualify.
Okay, so, well, even under any circumstance, if you're 8 years old, you're not going to qualify pursuant to the Organic Act. But if you're 26 and better, you may qualify.
One of the qualifications is that you're a U.S. citizen. In registering to vote now, you don't have to prove your citizenship.
Okay, which makes
so,
sense. Yeah.
So what we use to qualify you to run, via document, is simply your voter registration.
So, to register to vote is appropriately quite easy on Guam. And if this law passes, to appear on the ballot would also be quite easy. So the problem of ballot congestion, literally 700 or 800 candidates, is a real problem.
That's a possibility.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And then let's see. Do you statistically, I suppose, people who are early voting, at least if we follow the national averages and projections, the people who vote early are largely Democratic. They're participating in Democratic primaries. The people who are same-day voters are largely Republicans. That's, for whatever reason, that's just the way it is. I think Republicans skew older. Democrats skew younger. I mean, that's just the truth. Do you in any way track that to see how early voters are breaking versus same-day voters?
Sir, we only have about 3,000 voters that register as either Republican or Democrat.
Okay.
So we don't know what their what their parties are, most of our voters. Secondly, our early voting ballots are put all together at the precinct, so we don't know which ballot voted early or not.
Okay, because they're all mixed together and you just have
That's
no
correct.
idea. So the only way to figure that out, I guess, would be through exit polling? Because
Yes.
that would be of tremendous interest to the parties to find out who's voting early and who's,
That's correct,
who's
yeah.
showing up on the day to vote. Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you for your service. And I meant about what went on with the Westin, and the whole process was just seamless. So thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. And for clarity, when they brought up in the 34th legislature, that was me that introduced the bill. And you remember that, Ms. Penguin. I've been pursuing. But the only thing that really bothers me today is not your testimony or Ms. Sinford. Where's the party representatives? That I'm surprised at. But, I'm not going to beat them up, maybe Republican or Democrat. Senator Canante, do you have any questions for the panel in your closing?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have quite a few. I just want to thank, Ms. Pangilinan for your leadership. There's been really no issues. I mean, thank God this U.S. soil doesn't have any Trump running for office, right? I think we would have a lot of complaints coming from Senator Fisher's best friend. I'm so sorry. I forgot your name. Mr. Sangan? And Sangan. I really like your velvet jacket. It's my favorite. So it's quite unfortunate we don't have any party officials here, whether Republican or Democrat. I have friends on both sides, right? I just wanted to clarify. We print ballots, right, for both sides of the party. So do we print for every registered voter?
The law says that we print, initially, when I first started, we print 10% above the number of registered voters. Now we have the leeway. So we print, I want to say 100% of the registered voters as of right before early voting. If you remember, registration continues. So Senator Fisher, some people register and vote at the same time, just so long as it's before the registration deadline. So to answer your question, we do print the number of ballots equal to the number of registered voters closer to early voting.
Correct me if I'm wrong. So if there's 60,000 registered voters, quote unquote, right? There's not that many, but, oh, there is? Okay, 60,000, great, out of 170,000. Still small demographic. But I just wanted to clarify, so if 60,000 ballots are printed and only 20,000 people show up, 40,000 is wasted, correct?
Yes.
How much does it cost for ballots to be printed?
The actual ballot stock is 23 cents. That's the, yes. Then to code and program it is another, the total price of that is about $5,000. It comes out to about $1.50 each. Okay, so Senator Roy, may I say something about that for the primary election? Yes. Okay, so the primary election requires that the Office of Public Accountability or the Office of Attorney General is on a separate ballot, because for the primary election, there's the Democrat on one side and the Republican on one side. That's one sheet. We have to print a second sheet because Public Auditor and Attorney General is in the primary. So that's, that's something to be considered with regard to cost.
Okay, thank you for that information. Is it your recommendation to remove voter registration?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Can you guys stop sending paper notices out? Can you send it via email or electronically?
Not by law.
Okay, so we have to amend that. Do you think it would be beneficial to I guess, if we open precincts at 7 a.m. and we close them at 7 p.m., do you think that the work schedules of most of the people, I think, work 8 to 5, right? So that's literally like 1 hour and 1 hour after, 1 hour before and 1 hour after, with their consensus for lunch to cast their vote, right? So do you think that maybe we should delay voting like until 9 o'clock so that we can stay open till 9 so that people have an opportunity to vote at like after hours? Do you think that would be beneficial in any way?
from our experience, sir, our Manamku like to vote at 7 o'clock. In some polling sites, they're already in line. They come before or after Mass. They like to come early. As far as the workers, they're allowed, the law says that employers must give them 2 hours to vote. So that applies to both the early voting and the election day voting. And they have up until 8 o'clock at night to come in and vote. Senator Roy, as far as our experience goes, in 2022, most of our polling sites closed closer to 8 o'clock. We didn't have. But in 2018, I believe, there were polling sites that closed long after 8 o'clock because people were still in line.
Thank you for that information. So I guess the ballots, I mean, people are, as long as they're in line before the deadline, right, closing, then their votes will be casted. Okay. Do you think you have any difficulty recruiting precinct officials? Or do you have any recommendations? If you
Every time, I've been there for 12 years, for that many elections, we always have problems recruiting precinct officials. I cannot say that precinct officials cause the delay in results reporting, but I must say that we need to better that process, and part of it is across America, the local, across the election jurisdictions, our precinct officials do more than most of them. Most of them, they're able to take off. Most of them, they just turn in the stick, which is a little computer bar that they just turn in. Most of them just leave, they go in, they turn in all the stuff, but our precinct officials must stay and account for every ballot that was transferred to them. So, and they start early and they finish late. So with regard to that, we believe that in our election comparative analysis report, with the recommendations, the Guam Election Commission is requesting or is recommending that we up their stipends.
Okay, thank you for that information. Do you, for the precincts, we have 19 precincts, correct? 21?
No, we have 19 villages, 22 polling sites, and 67 precincts.
Okay.
By law, our precincts must not be substantially over 800. So, Dededo by itself has 15 precincts, and that's of course, our biggest. So, that part of the law. And Senator Roy, you're probably alluding to what should we do at this point in time with precincts. With early voting, I think operationally, we can, depends, that's something, but by law, the Guam Election Commission has to make sure that the precincts are not substantially over 800. We can go over 800, but the technical term or the legal term is substantially.
Okay. Thank you for that information. What do you think unfortunately, there's not much people here to testify or give us any support. I'm hopeful that after today's public hearing, there'll be some more emails sent in or delivered to our mailbox here. But what do you think can help bring more candidates out to run? I mean, other than trying to register more people, and getting the voter turnout even better, right? I gotta say, under your tenure, you've been very excellent in your public service. I don't think we've had so many issues. Again, just because probably Trump doesn't run on Guam, but other than that, I'm really trying to figure out how do we get better candidates running for office? I mean, it's very hard for a freshman to run. I mean, I'm very blessed. I think Senator Fisher is blessed to be given the opportunity on their first run, but it is quite difficult for anyone to run in any public office capacity. I mean, even the CUC, it's hard. The same people been there forever and ever and ever. I think they're gonna, no offense, die on post, because there's no one else running. It's hard to run against them.
So your question is, how do we get candidates? Well, the staff of the Guam Election Commission and we always ask whoever we meet, including Mr. Linsangan, are you coming into our office to sign up as a candidate? So with regard to that, we do have current public elected officials that have gone out and registered lots of their supporters to vote, and they've had them come out to, obviously they're sitting. The parties and the candidates, it's up to them how much involvement or how much they put into it. I think one of the tools that the Guam Election Commission and the law provides is that we have volunteer voter registration. And that's when your volunteer voter registrars will even go to the homes and register folks. That's a very active process. That keeps us going with regard. January, we will start. Actually, we've already mentioned to some that our voter registrar training is, it's available, but for those that are new. But our volunteer voter registrars already can come into our office and pick up their packets to hurry up and start registering. Those are those voters that are registered through our volunteer registration, those show up to vote because our volunteer registrars, we are aware of them following up to make sure they call these people up and they're to hurry up and come in to vote. With regard to what else we can do with one of the things that we want to do is get a picture of how many of our residents of Guam are eligible to register to vote and don't. Unfortunately, the census data doesn't give us that because the census data does not tell us how many are U.S. citizens. It does tell us how many are what age, but it doesn't tell us how many are U.S. citizens.
Thank you for that. I know this seems like an oversight hearing for you, but one more thing. Petitions. Do you have any recollection on any other jurisdiction with, because I think if I'm correct, right, we need to have at least 250 for Guam senatorial race, and I think 500 for gubernatorial race, and 500 for congressional, right?
Yes.
So with that being said, do you know of any jurisdiction that would, I guess, has lesser petition count? We're trying to remove the...
Some of them don't require petitions. There are some. Just remember that there are over 1,600 election jurisdictions. In most states, state election offices do not run elections. It's the counties and the cities that run election. Some, very few of the state election offices actually run elections.
Do you think that can work here, just removing the petition requirement or lessening it to at least 15? Because there's 15 seats for senators, right? So maybe only 15 or 21, because back in the day, according to Ms. Lansangan, 21.
Again, I don't know how to campaign, but I believe that that's part of the campaign process is, yeah, so that, operationally, one of our recommendations in the election comparative analysis report is once a candidate meets the threshold, we want to stop validating signatures. But the current law requires the Guam Election Commission to validate all the signatures submitted, whether you send us 1,000 or 2,000, the law says that we have to look at every single signature.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the hearing's feedback from my colleagues, and again, I believe that there was a lot of testimony heard today amongst just our colleagues here and the Guam Election Commission, so I think we can improve this legislation and move it forward and to some extent. And I also just wanted to give again a shout out to the entire Guam Election Commission for making sure Guam's election is accountable and has no problems. And just for the record, Senator Fisher is not friends with Donald Trump. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Granata. You know, I only have one comment, is that you mentioned increasing the stipend for officials. Have they all registered? Are they all U.S. citizens? And have they voted? That'll be the three questions I'd ask, because I don't want to increase anybody's pay and they didn't vote for the last election and they're just looking for a job during election time. Because, you know, it's a worthy job. It's a well-funded job. But I'm just concerned is that are they registered to vote? Are they used? There's a bunch of stuff that I'm going to ask, but I will worry about that when that comes up. Okay, so we'll talk offline on that one. But with that, there's no one else to present testimony on this bill. This hearing is now concluded. I want to thank everyone for attending this hearing and providing feedback and suggestion. Bill number 95-37 COR, public hearing, is now adjourned. It is now 10:48. Thank you for your time. Please be safe. Now we will now proceed to Bill 143-37. Bill 143-37, introduced by, also authored by Senator Roy Canata, co-sponsored by Senator Amanda Shelton, Senator Tina Rose Munoz Barnes, Senator William Parkinson, Senator Dwayne Snickers, and myself, Senator Snogsy, Senator Chris Barnett, an act to add a new section 96-106 of Guam, of Chapter 96, Title 10, Guam Code Annotated, relative to requiring the availability of automated external defibrillators in all government of Guam offices by June 30, 2024. Physical note for Bill 143-37 was requested on June 30th. We received and disseminated via email on July 7th. Those participating on behalf of Bill 143-37 are invited to the panel, and there are no one that signed up for it. Outstanding. I'd like to recognize my colleagues that are participating this morning. We have the author of the bill, Senator Canata, Senator Ted Otategui, Senator Joanne Brown, Senator Fisher. Reminder of the general rules for this public hearing. If there was any documents to be photocopied and distributed, please do so, but there is none. Panel members are asked to my colleagues, questions and testimony shall be confined to the substance or nature of the agenda. Please, personal inference as to the character or motive of any senator or any individual testifying is not permitted. Any violation of the general rule of conduct will result in removal from the public hearing. Proper form and decorum shall be practiced by all present in the public hearing room. For this proceeding, individuals who fail to maintain proper form and decorum shall be restricted from participating and will be escorted from the room. When you speak, my colleagues just speak into the microphone. You don't have to state your name. I'd like to thank my colleagues that are participating today. We have myself, Senator Canata, Senator Ted Otategui, Senator Joanne Brown, Senator Tom Fisher. On the public notice portion, in compliance with open government law, the notice for this public hearing posted on GovGuam Public Notice Portal KGTF PBS Channel 12 and disseminated via email to all senators and all main media broadcasting outlets on Tuesday, September 20th, and then again on Monday, September 25th. I'd like to ask Senator Canata to make his opening, and then we can just move along with comments from my colleagues. Senator Canata.
This is Masi again, and thank you to my colleagues and those attending live and staying with us for the long haul. Bill 147 is a simple bill which would require availability for automated external defibrillators, AEDs, in every government office which serves the public. These portable devices are used to treat life-threatening condition known as sudden cardiac arrest, SCA. SCA can happen to anyone at any time, regardless of age or health status. It occurs when the heart suddenly stops beating effectively, cutting off blood flow to vital organs. Without the immediate treatment of SCA, the SCA can lead to death within minutes. Unfortunately, statistics show that the survival rates of SCA are low without the access to AEDs. However, with the quick use of an AED along with the CPR, survival rates increase significantly. This is why it's crucial to have AEDs readily available in all public spaces where large numbers of people gather. And I look forward to hearing any testimony from my colleagues that unfortunately there's no one else here to testify. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Tyree, would you like to comment on this?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think you know where I'm going on this comment. Where's the money? You know, we have a fiscal note here from BBMR indicating that it's going to cost almost $500,000 to ensure this bill moves forward and provides the defibrillators as the bill claims. Unfortunately, there's no cost to this bill. Like I said, $500,000 just on the equipment alone. But what we're forgetting here, Mr. Chair, is the training that's going to be needed. You put these defibrillators in areas of the government of Guam, you're going to need people to know how to work this. You know, you're talking about electricity. So I don't know if you're going to have someone just pull it off the wall and there's a bam, hit you on the chest with it. Can cause more problems. You know, you need training for these, and that's going to cost money as well. So my concern, again, is the cost on this. Obviously, it's life-saving mechanism that is needed for our agencies, and it would be nice to have. I mean, we're working on DOE right now, providing these defibrillators there, and hopefully we can get some federal funding, you know, to provide it. But once again, we're starting to put ourselves and supplanting ourselves that we would not be able to avail ourselves of federal funding if we mandate bills like this. So to ensure that we do not lose any federal funding, we need to really look into this first before we move anything forward. We saw what happened to the feminine hygiene products, and now that we're not able to avail ourselves of these federally anymore, funding federally. So I just don't want us to lose that opportunity as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'm next. I mean, certainly I think we can appreciate the desire to have these defibrillators available. I mean, I would ask now, are we talking every office? I mean, does it mean every senatorial office scattered around? Do we each have to have one? The training required, and also the liability. What if someone uses this on someone and they don't know how to use it properly and they adversely harm the individual? I think that's something we also need to be aware of. The other tremendous challenge that I've seen time and time and time again is the government's inability to maintain equipment. You know, how often do these things need to be replaced? How often do they need to be checked to make sure they're working properly, on top of whether or not you have trained individuals there to use it? Because there's liability, there's always liability. I defer to our other colleague, Senator Tom Fisher, who's an attorney, but it opens up a whole other dynamic. I mean, of course, if anyone's in need of assistance, you want to be able to provide that assistance. But I think we also need to look at what are we opening up the government to, especially when we already see consistently, and you know, Senator Tello had mentioned it with regards to our public school system. We can't even maintain basic sanitation, least of all the physical infrastructure of buildings, to ensure that our children are in safe, clean environments to go to school. So I understand the intent, and I support the intent, the execution and implementation of this particular bill. And I know there was another one to have these available within the schools. I just think it creates a whole other dynamic again of whether or not we have the ability not only to acquire them, maintain them, ensure that individuals that use them in the event someone's in need of assistance has the proper training, and then what does it open the government up to in terms of liability on top of the additional cost that is also being looked at. I mean, at some point, I want to save everyone's life. It could be my own, it could be a loved one of mine. But I think we need to decide at some point to what degree is the government, to what degree do we expand the government to be responsible for literally everything? And yet there's so much we do so poorly. There's so much we don't execute to the level that we'd like to. And while we continue to pass bills, we have very little mechanisms in place to require responsible execution of these laws. I mean, there's many laws in the books for department and agencies that are not being implemented. We just brought up earlier with regards to, providing this information and transparency in the government agencies. I support that bill. But then what's the penalty? There are existing government department and agencies that do not have, their websites up to date or current with information that's needed. So I think we need to be mindful to look at all of that before we proceed. I think the idea is great. I think the ability to execute it is another challenge, including the additional costs that it's going to provide to the taxpayers on top of things we're already challenged with providing them. So with that, Mr. Chair, I appreciate the opportunity to comment on this bill.
Thank you, Senator Brown. I'm in agreement with that. Senator Fisher, do you have any comments on the bill?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I do support the bill. Chairman Joe, you and I might need this someday, depending on what office we're in. But yeah, I do support the bill. I'd like to see that in offices. I know that a lot of commercial establishments use them. I don't think that potential obstacles are not overcomable. So I do support the bill. I think it's a dollar well spent if we can save some lives. I just hope you put about 20 times the required number up at Department of Revenue and Taxation, because there's a lot of stress up there. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. And I'll just comment before I ask the senator to close. No, I'm in agreement. Maybe we'll just continue. We'll continue to receive testimony, because we do need to take a look at every agency, and like was mentioned, is it going to be at every senator's office and so forth, and just take a look on how we want to move this bill forward to make sure that when we move it forward, it has a source of funding and a means to fund it, because there may be federal grants that will pay for this, but at the end of the day, we need to make sure we have funding to train folks, be able to maintain it, and identify funding on how it needs to be replaced or even updated. And with that, I ask Senator Canata to make his comments or closing. But I will not end this bill today. This bill will stay open until we get more input, just a little bit more input, so we know where we're going with this. Senator Canata.
Mr. Chair, thank you for that note. I think certainly we want to possibly have a hybrid bill with Senator Barnett's bill in relevance to AED. The AED is a life-saving tool that is a simpler kind of defibrillator for public use. There are instructions that are impaneled inside the unit, so it's not at the same intensity as the ones that are affixed into ambulances or at the hospital. And in reference to the concerns of my colleagues regarding the responsibility of life and death, right? I hear that issue. It is not an easy task. Similar to CPR, once you are advancing CPR onto any individual, you are liable for in the event of the Good Samaritan. You are trying to do goodwill, but if the individual dies on your watch, you're technically responsible for that life being lost. So you literally have to keep that person staying alive, and you apply CPR. As a certified CPR individual, I know that is a huge liability, and I have the right to choose whether to conduct that service or to leave it to the professionals, because you cannot render service and then halfway pull out because you ran out of energy night, right? Because you have to wait for emergency and medics to attend and relieve you of your duty. So I just wanted to thank Mr. Chair and his committee for having this hearing. I have nothing further to add, and I look forward to hearing more from public testimony, hopefully after the coming days.
Thank you very much. There being no one else to present testimony on this bill, the hearing today is concluded, but the bill will continue to stay open for all the inputs and requests for participation from all the different agencies on the source of funding. I want to thank everyone for attending this hearing and providing feedback and suggestion. Bill 143-37 LS, public hearing is now adjourned. The time now is 11:01. Please be safe and have a nice day. Thank you.